The famous stall in Omoater. Omoater was a town where the sun hung low in the sky, scorching the earth and casting a golden hue over the bustling market square. The air was filled with the sounds of merchants shouting their wares, travelers battering, and the smell of sizzling food that beckoned to anyone passing by. In the heart of the market stood a food stall that had become the talk of the town, Auntie Fola's kitchen. Auntie Fola's store was small and humble, tucked away in a busy corner near the market's entrance. The store, made from old wooden planks and a rusted corrugated roof, was nothing grand. But the smell that rose from it was intoxicating, wafting through the air like a beacon, drawing people from every corner of Omoater and beyond. It was said that the spices she used were rare and her cooking was unparalleled, the richest, most flavorful dishes anyone had ever tasted. Her most famous dishes were spicy soup and rice dishes, known to make even the most hardened travelers mouth water. People came from neighboring towns, from far-off villages, and even from the city, all to experience Auntie Fola's food. They didn't mind the long journey, the crowded market, or the wait, the food was worth it. It wasn't just the taste of her dishes that made Auntie Fola's stall famous. There was a mystery surrounding it, one that no one could solve. Despite the large crowds, Auntie Fola never revealed her secret recipe, not to anyone. Some said she had learned it from an ancient family member who had passed down the knowledge for generations. Others whispered that she had received a blessing from the gods themselves, a supernatural favor that made her food irresistible. But no one knew for sure. The lines at Auntie Fola's stall stretched long, and the market square often felt as if it was at full capacity, with people crowding around, eager to taste her famous dishes. The vendors nearby were envious, watching as customers ignored their stalls and rushed to Auntie Fola's. There was no denying it, her food was more than just a meal, it was an experience. Among the crowd, there was a figure who seemed out of place. Baba Kofi, a local madman, wandered the market square, muttering to himself and laughing in an unsettling way. His appearance was wild, hair matted and tangled, clothes torn and hanging loosely from his frail body. He didn't interact with anyone, but his presence was impossible to ignore. His loud, eerie laugh rang out in bursts, as he wandered from stall to stall. "You are eating from the pot of the cursed," he shouted, his voice carrying over the noise of the market, echoing off the walls of the nearby stalls. "The pot of the cursed. Do you hear me?" His words seemed strange, almost nonsensical, yet they held an unsettling weight. Baba Kofi's warnings were ignored by most. The market crowd was too busy, too focused on the food and the business to pay any attention to a madman. But every time he passed Auntie Fola's stall, he would stop, his eyes wild and unblinking, and he would point directly at the customer sitting down to eat. "You are all eating from the pot of the cursed," Baba Kofi repeated, his voice rising, almost frantic. "The pot of the dead. The pot of evil." People chuckled nervously or simply turned away, dismissing him as just another madman lost in his own world. Auntie Fola herself would often laugh off his warnings. "Ignore him," she would say to her customers with a warm smile, "he's just a fool, lost in his madness." But despite her reassurances, there was something about Baba Kofi's words that felt different. Something about the way he laughed, sharp, almost knowing, as if he was trying to tell them something important. Yet, in the end, the crowds would always return to their meals, content with the taste of her food, and the warning was forgotten as quickly as it had been spoken. Life in the market carried on, as it always did. But deep down, a few people wondered, was there something more to Auntie Fola's success than met the eye? Was Baba Kofi's warning just the ramblings of a madman, or was there a dark truth hiding beneath the surface? For now, no one had the answers. But the mystery of Auntie Fola's success was just beginning to unravel, slowly, and in ways that no one could have anticipated. A rival's jealousy. Across from Auntie Fola's bustling store stood Mimi's food stand, a small, humble shop made from the same weathered wood, and sitting under the same blazing sun. Yet, there was a stark difference. Mimi's stall was almost always empty. While the crowd around Auntie Fola's stall grew larger and louder by the day, Mimi's customers were few, and her dishes remained untouched. Mimi's food was just as good as Auntie Fola's, or so she believed. She cooked the same hearty, flavorful meals, spicy soup, fragrant rice dishes, and crispy fried plantains. Her prices were even lower, thinking that maybe a lower cost would draw in more customers, but nothing worked. Every day, she stood behind her counter, stirring pots and watching the empty benches. Only a few occasional passers-by would stop, glance at the food, and then walk away. As the days passed, Mimi's frustration grew. She couldn't understand it. Why was it that no one would come to her store when she offered the same food at a better price? She worked just as hard, if not harder, to prepare her dishes. Yet, her store remained silent, while Auntie Fola's was always full of life. Mimi began to notice patterns. The people who came to Auntie Fola's store weren't just regular customers. Wealthy traders in sharp suits, young workers with no money to spare, even elders who should have been resting at home, they all flocked to Auntie Fola. Even those who had no intention of eating would often sit down, chatting and laughing, unable to resist the pull of the aroma. Traders from other towns abandoned their stores for hours to grab a plate of food, and the bus drivers who stopped at the market would rush straight to Auntie Fola's stand, disregarding the passengers waiting in their buses. Everyone was captivated, as though they had been hypnotized by the taste, the smell, or something more. Mimi's suspicion grew. What was the secret behind Auntie Fola's success? There had to be something more to it than just good food. Was it her charm? Was it her connections with the market traders? Or was there something supernatural, something hidden that she was using to draw in such a massive crowd? One afternoon, as Mimi sat on a small stool outside her own shop, she watched Auntie Fola's customers devour their meals with a kind of feverish joy. The laughter, the chatter, the satisfaction in their eyes, it was as if they were experiencing a kind of magic. Mimi couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. No one should have that much power over people, especially not with something as simple as food. She began watching Auntie Fola's store more closely. Baba Coffee was there again, as always, rambling about the pot of the cast, but Mimi, unlike the others, didn't ignore his words. She watched him more intently, wondering if his warnings might hold some truth. The man's laugh was unsettling, his eyes wild with the knowledge of something unknown. Mimi's mind raced with questions. Was there a secret ingredient? A hidden charm? Or had Auntie Fola made a deal with the spirits? The more Mimi thought about it, the more she felt desperate for answers. She knew she needed to uncover the truth. Something was fueling Auntie Fola's success, and Mimi would stop at nothing to find out what it was. Each day, as Auntie Fola's line grew longer, Mimi felt her frustration building. Her food was just as good, but her store remained empty. What could she do to match up? What was Auntie Fola hiding? The thought of giving up never crossed Mimi's mind, but the burning question in her heart couldn't be ignored. What was the secret? And how far would she go to uncover it? Mimi knew that to succeed, she would need to find the answer, and she would need to find it fast. She couldn't let the market pass her by, not when her business, her dream, was on the line. The time had come for Mimi to take action. Seeking answers. After yet another slow day at her store, Mimi sat on the edge of her wooden counter, staring at the empty space around her. The market had been alive with activity, but no one had stopped by. She could hear the laughter and chatter from across the road, where Auntie Fola's store was as busy as ever. The smell of spicy food wafted through the air, and Mimi felt the familiar pang of frustration stir in her chest. She had tried everything, lower prices, better presentation, even offering new dishes, but nothing seemed to work. She couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper, something hidden, was at play. How could Auntie Fola's food have such a hold over people? It was as if there was magic in her cooking. That night, as Mimi sat in her small house, staring out at the darkened streets of Omoater, a thought crossed her mind. If there was a secret to Auntie Fola's success, perhaps she could uncover it with the help of someone who understood things beyond the physical world. Mimi knew exactly who could help: Elder Iriti, the village's spiritual guide and wise elder. Elder Iriti had lived in Omoater for as long as anyone could remember. She was a figure both feared and respected, known for her deep knowledge of the supernatural world. People came to her for blessings, for advice, and for answers to questions that couldn't be explained by normal means. Without hesitation, Mimi decided she would go to her. She needed answers. The following morning, before the sun was even fully up, Mimi made her way to Elder Iriti's home at the edge of the village. The path to the elder's house was lined with tall trees, and the air seemed thicker here, as if the very ground beneath her feet held secrets. When Mimi arrived, she was greeted warmly by the elder, who invited her into her humble hut. The inside was dimly lit by the soft glow of candles, and the air smelled of incense and herbs. Elder Iriti sat on a woven mat, surrounded by bowls filled with strange powders, dried plants, and ancient-looking books. Her wise eyes studied Mimi carefully as she took a seat before her. "What troubles you, child?" Elder Iriti asked in her calm, steady voice. Mimi hesitated at first, but the elder's presence had a way of making her feel at ease. She took a deep breath and spoke. "I don't understand, Elder Iriti. I have the same food, the same dishes, but no one comes to my stall. Auntie Fola, across the market, is always busy, always surrounded by customers, and I don't know why. No matter what I do, nothing works. There has to be something more, something beyond just good food. Please, help me understand." Elder Iriti listened intently, her face impassive as Mimi spoke. When she finished, the elder nodded slowly, her gaze thoughtful. She reached for a small, intricately carved container beside her and opened it, revealing a fine powder that shimmered in the dim light. "You are right, Mimi," Elder Iriti said softly. "Sometimes, people seek success through means beyond the physical world. There are forces at play that most cannot see, and these forces can influence the outcomes of our lives. You feel there is something unnatural in Auntie Fola's success, something hidden beneath the surface, yes?" Mimi nodded, feeling a sense of relief that Elder Iriti seemed to understand. "If you wish to uncover the truth, you must look deeper," Elder Iriti continued. "I can offer you a way to reveal what is hidden. This powder," she said, holding out the small container, "is special. It will reveal the hidden forces that guide a person's fate. Sprinkle it near Auntie Fola's cooking pot, and the truth will show itself." Mimi's heart raced as she took the small bottle from the elder's hands. The powder was light and fine, almost like dust, and it seemed to shimmer as if it contained a secret of its own. "But be careful," Elder Iriti warned, her eyes narrowing with seriousness. "Once you reveal what lies beneath, there is no turning back. The truth may not always be what you expect. It could bring answers, but it could also bring consequences." Mimi felt a chill run down her spine. She wasn't sure what kind of consequences the elder was referring to, but her curiosity burned stronger than her fear. She had to know the truth. "I understand, Elder Iriti," Mimi said, her voice firm. "I am ready. I will do whatever it takes." Elder Iriti gave her a long, steady look before nodding. "Go then, and be cautious. The spirits do not favor those who meddle too freely with things they do not understand. But if you are determined, you may find the answers you seek." With that, Mimi stood up, the small bottle of shimmering powder now securely in her hand. She bowed deeply to the elder, who returned the gesture with a knowing smile. As Mimi made her way back through the village, her mind was racing. The powder in her hand was the key to unlocking the mystery, but what would she find once she used it? Was Auntie Fola truly blessed, or was there something darker at work? Mimi didn't have all the answers yet, but one thing was certain: she was about to uncover the truth, no matter what it meant. The revelation. The following morning, Mimi woke up with a mixture of determination and anxiety. Today was the day. The day she would uncover the secret behind Auntie Fola's overwhelming success. She had the powder, Elder Iritis powder, in her pocket, and the time had come to use it. The market was already busy when Mimi arrived. The sun was bright, casting a hot, golden glow over Omoate's bustling streets. The aroma of sizzling food filled the air, and the noise of traders shouting and customers bargaining echoed around her. As usual, Auntie Fola's stall was swarming with people. Mimi's heart skipped a beat. This was it. She stood at the edge of the market, watching the crowd around Auntie Fola's stall, and waited for the perfect moment. Her palms were sweaty, her breath shallow. She could feel her pulse quicken as she realized the enormity of what she was about to do. This was no small act. She was about to reveal something that could change everything. The crowd seemed oblivious to her presence, their attention fixed entirely on the food. Auntie Fola was behind the store, expertly dishing out plates of food, her hands moving swiftly, her smile never fading. No one would suspect anything. Mimi slowly walked toward Auntie Fola's store, her movements calm, deliberate. She made her way past the crowd, keeping her head down, her eyes focused on the small area behind the store where the large black cooking pot sat. The pot. It was the heart of Auntie Fola's success. The object that might hold the secret to it all. When she reached the back of the store, Mimi stood still for a moment, taking in the scene around her. The air was thick with the smell of spices and smoke. This was her chance. No one was looking her way, and the bustling crowd made it easy to blend in. Mimi took a deep breath and pulled out the small bottle of shimmering powder. The cool glass felt smooth in her hand, almost comforting, as if it held the answers to the questions that had haunted her for so long. She unscrewed the cap, the soft clink of it echoing in her ears as she silently sprinkled the powder around the base of the large pot. She did it quickly, her fingers trembling slightly, but determined to do it right. The moment the powder touched the ground, something strange happened. At first, it was just a subtle shift, a slight vibration in the air. But then, it grew stronger. The ground beneath Mimi's feet seemed to tremble, as if something deep inside the earth was awakening. A low, deep hum filled the air, vibrating through the wooden planks of the store. Mimi's breath caught in her throat as she watched the pot begin to vibrate, as if it were alive, reacting to the powder she had sprinkled. The air around her grew thick and heavy, and for a moment, Mimi felt as though the world had shifted. A strange tension hung in the air, almost like a storm was brewing. Her heart raced as she stepped back, her eyes fixed on the pot. The noise from the market seemed to fade for a moment. Mimi could hear the hum growing louder, vibrating through the ground and into her bones. The customers at Auntie Fola's store began to notice, their conversations faltering as the air seemed to grow colder. "Did you feel that?" one customer asked, glancing around nervously. Another customer looked around, her brow furrowed. "What's going on?" "The air feels strange." The murmur of uncertainty began to spread through the crowd, and Mimi could see them shifting uncomfortably. But no one seemed to know what was happening, and the food was still being served, as though the strange occurrences were just part of the experience. Suddenly, the hum grew louder, and the pot began to shake violently, as if something was trying to escape from within. A low, eerie sound echoed from deep inside the pot, growing in intensity. Mimi's heart pounded in her chest. The vibrations were becoming impossible to ignore, and the ground beneath her seemed to quake with each passing moment. Then, the air grew still, too still. The strange hum stopped abruptly, and for a brief moment, the market fell silent. People stared at the pot, their eyes wide, their faces filled with a mixture of confusion and fear. Mimi watched, her breath caught in her throat, as the vibrations continued to pulse from the pot. She could feel the tension building, her stomach tightening with dread. Something was happening, something far beyond what she had imagined. As the seconds ticked by, a terrible realization crept into Mimi's mind. She had uncovered something far darker than she had expected. What had she unleashed? What kind of secret had Auntie Fola been hiding? Mimi stood frozen, her eyes locked on the pot, knowing that the truth was about to reveal itself in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. The snake in the pot. The moment the vibrations from the pot reached their peak, the atmosphere in the market changed. A low, menacing hiss filled the air, reverberating through the ground and into the very hearts of the people nearby. Mimi's breath caught in her throat, her eyes locked on the large cooking pot that had started it all. The hum had shifted to a sharp, eerie sound, like the crackling of a storm before the lightning strikes. The crowd stood frozen for a moment, their faces filled with confusion and unease. No one knew what was happening, but the air was thick with anticipation, as though something unnatural was about to unfold. Then, it happened. From the pot came a movement so sudden, so terrifying, that the entire market seemed to gasp in unison. A massive snake, its scales shimmering a deep, golden hue, slithered out of the pot, its body twisting and coiling with eerie grace. The snake was enormous, its dark body shining like polished obsidian, and the glow from its golden belly seemed to pulse with an unnatural light. The air grew cold as the snake raised its head, its eyes gleaming with malice. Its hiss was deafening, a low, threatening sound that echoed through the market like a warning from the spirit world. People screamed, some shrieking in terror, others stumbling backward as they scrambled to escape. Panic spread like wildfire. Snake! Snake! Someone screamed, and the cry sent the crowd into a frenzy. People rushed in every direction, knocking over tables, overturning stools, and trampling on food. The once bustling market, filled with laughter and joy, was now in chaos, the sound of desperate footsteps and cries for help filling the air. Mimi stood frozen in place, her eyes wide with shock. She had suspected something dark, but she had never imagined this. Auntie Fola's food, the source of her success, had come at a terrible price. The snake, its golden belly still glowing, slithered through the crowd, its piercing eyes scanning the terrified people who dared to look at it. The snake seemed to hold the power to hypnotize, its presence commanding fear in the hearts of everyone who saw it. Auntie Fola, who had been serving customers just moments before, now stood at the edge of the chaos, her face pale with fear. Her usual composure was gone, replaced by panic and desperation. She rushed toward the kitchen, her hands trembling as she tried to push the lid back onto the pot, but it was too late. The snake had already emerged, and there was no stopping the destruction it would cause. Get back! Everyone, get back! Auntie Fola cried, her voice high-pitched and frantic. She waved her arms, trying to direct people away from the serpent, but the chaos around her was too much to control. The snake continued to slither menacingly, its glowing belly casting an eerie light over the scattered crowd. As the snake made its way through the market, the ground seemed to tremble beneath its massive body. Its hissing grew louder, more aggressive, as it moved toward the nearest vendor. The once thriving market now lay in ruins. Customers, once eager to taste Auntie Fola's dishes, were now fleeing in terror, their plates abandoned, their food forgotten. No one cared about the taste of the food anymore, all they could think about was escaping the venomous creature that had emerged from the pot. Mimi stood at the edge of the market, her heart racing. She had uncovered the truth, but at what cost? Auntie Fola's success had been built on a dark and dangerous secret. The snake wasn't just a symbol of power, it was the source of her prosperity. The food that had drawn the crowds had been imbued with something far more sinister than anyone had realized. Auntie Fola, her face twisted in fear and regret, collapsed to her knees as the last remnants of her once thriving business crumbled before her eyes. Her customers had seen the truth. Her food had come at the cost of something far more valuable, a bargain with dark forces that had now been exposed. The snake let out one final, chilling hiss before slithering back into the pot, its glowing belly slowly fading as it disappeared. The ground ceased its trembling, and the once frantic chaos began to subside, leaving only silence in its wake. The people of the market, still recovering from the terror they had just witnessed, began to whisper among themselves. Some were in shock, others in disbelief. But all knew one thing for sure: Auntie Fola's secret had been laid bare. Her name, once synonymous with the finest food in Omoater, was now tainted. Her business, built on the strength of a dark pact, was no more. The truth had been revealed, and it had changed everything. As the last of the crowd dispersed, Auntie Fola slowly stood, her face filled with shame. She had gotten everything she ever wanted, but at the expense of her soul. Now, she was left with nothing. Mimi watched the scene unfold in front of her, her heart heavy with the knowledge of what she had discovered. The truth had come at a terrible price, and the market, once full of life and joy, would never be the same again. Mimi's new beginning. In the aftermath of the terrifying events, the once vibrant market of Omoater was a shadow of its former self. The crowd had dispersed in a flurry of panic, and the air was thick with unease. The smell of food, which had once been a source of comfort, now carried with it a trace of suspicion and fear. Auntie Fola's stall, once the heart of the market, was abandoned, its tables overturned, plates shattered, and food trampled underfoot. The market that had been filled with laughter and life now felt empty, as though something precious had been lost. Auntie Fola herself had disappeared, vanishing as quietly and mysteriously as the snake that had come from her pot. No one knew where she had gone or what had become of her, but her name was rarely spoken in the days that followed. People avoided discussing the horrors they had witnessed, as though acknowledging the truth would bring it all back to life. In the midst of the chaos, Mimi's store remained. At first, no one came. The market was wary, distrustful of food, and cautious of any vendor. The memory of Auntie Fola's snake still hung heavy in the air, and customers were hesitant to sit down and eat. Mimi's heart sank as she watched the empty streets, but she refused to give up. She had worked hard to build her own reputation, and now, it was her time to show the town that things could be different. Mimi knew she could not erase the past, the fear, the darkness that had emerged, but she could offer something the people could trust. Honesty. Transparency. And above all, food that came from a place of integrity. Every day, Mimi arrived early to set up her stall. She greeted customers warmly, explained her ingredients, and made sure everyone knew she was cooking with nothing more than simple, wholesome food. She made her dishes with care, just as she always had, but now she poured her heart into each plate. She wanted the people to know that they could trust her food, that there were no dark secrets hidden in her pots. At first, it was slow. People came only in small numbers, hesitant and cautious, but slowly, word spread. Mimi was different. She wasn't trying to sell magic or mystery, she was offering something simple, something pure. Her food was made with love, with respect for her craft, and little by little, her customers began to return. Slowly, the market started to regain a sense of normalcy, though it was clear that the events surrounding Auntie Fola had changed the town forever. Over time, Mimi's business began to grow. She gained the trust of the people, and they began to tell their friends, and their friends told others. The once empty streets around her stall started to fill up again with people eager to taste her honest food. Mimi's stall became a quiet sanctuary in the midst of the turmoil, a place where people could sit down, relax, and enjoy a simple meal, free from fear or suspicion. Despite the success, Mimi couldn't shake the memory of what she had uncovered. The snake, Auntie Fola's dark secret, and the way it had all unfolded, it haunted her. She had learned the truth, but in the process, she had seen firsthand the dangerous allure of greed and the lengths people would go to for power and success. At night, as she closed her stall and walked back to her small home, Mimi often found herself wondering. Was the darkness truly gone? The snake had slithered back into the pot, but had it really vanished? Had Auntie Fola's bargain with the spirits truly ended, or was it just waiting, lurking in the shadows, waiting for another opportunity to rise again? Mimi could never forget the feeling of that cold, unnatural presence that had filled the market when the snake emerged. And while her business was thriving, she couldn't help but feel a nagging uncertainty. Could something like that ever be truly gone? Or had it left a mark on the town that would never fade? But for now, Mimi chose to focus on the future. Her customers trusted her, and her heart was clear. She had done what no one else had dared to do. She had faced the darkness and built something new. The town was healing, and so was she. Mimi's new beginning was just that, a beginning. With every plate she served, she felt a sense of peace, knowing that she was doing things right. And though the shadow of Auntie Fola's past still lingered in her mind, Mimi knew one thing for sure: she would never compromise her values, no matter what. In the quiet moments before bed, she would look out at the stars, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. She had uncovered the truth, but now she was writing her own story, and that was a story of resilience, honesty, and hope. The market was still recovering, but Mimi was ready to face whatever came next. For the first time in a long time, she felt at peace. The future was hers to shape.